Thanks everyone for joining us tonight. Hi, Salvador. Um, okay, let's get started. Welcome. Thank you everyone for being here for the third and final event in our series Here and There, a murals conversation series. Honestly, Salvador and I were just talking about how much fun this has been to put together, and we've had two really, really incredible, thoughtful conversations in the last couple of months, and I'm a little bit sad that it's over. Hopefully, we can bring this back in some other, future life. But I think we're just gonna jump right in and get started. And I'm gonna introduce myself, do a couple logistical notes, and then hand it over to you, Sal. My name is Anna, and I work with the Regional Arts and Culture Council on our communications team. And I'm really excited to get to sort of cross into the public art world and work on this event with Salvador. Um, right, just so that everyone knows, if you don't know already, this event is produced by the Regional Arts and Culture Council in partnership with the lovely, talented folks at Open Signal here in Portland. Um, the Regional Arts and Culture Council is a nonprofit organization that manages the arts investments for the city of Portland and for Multnomah County. And there are a couple of different program areas within RAC, including grants and arts education and public art. I think that's all of them. There's a lot of different things that we do, and we're excited to host this conversation tonight in sort of the public art program area. So, Salvador, if you want to go ahead, or maybe I'll say quickly that we do have our ASL interpreters joining us tonight. We're grateful that they're here, and we have a live captioning service also. We hoped to have it live on the screen, but we're having some technical difficulties. So if you are streaming on YouTube, you should see in the the video description that there's a link, and live captioning is happening. You'll just have to open it in a window and arrange them next to each other. And then I'm going to share the link on our Facebook live stream right now too. So just wanted to let you know that, and then we will edit the captions into the video after we're done, so that if you miss it, you can catch it later. The only other thing I'm going to say before I disappear is that if you have questions tonight, we really hope that you'll add your voice to our conversation. There's a chat feature in both YouTube and Facebook, so wherever you're tuning in from, if you want to drop a question in there as you think of it, I will circle back at the end of the night and make sure that we get those questions asked and hopefully answered. Or if you want to send us a message later, we can always respond then. But I think, Salvador, can you take it from here and introduce yourself?
I can. Yeah. Thanks, Anna. Hello, all.
We can't. Can we hear you? Yeah. Okay.
Oh, no. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this, well, at least here in Portland, rainy evening. It's finally here. I've been waiting actually for the rain all day, and I can hear it right now. So it's lovely. And thanks, Anna, so much for the greeting and your help with organizing this event with me. I was just telling Anna before we were beginning just how much of a pleasure it's been doing these with her. So thank you, Anna. We appreciate all of you who have joined us tonight to hear from our two wonderful artists that are taking part in today's conversation, Jaque Fragua, Daren Todd. And this is just part of the programming offered by RAC's Public Art Murals program. As Anna said, my name is Salvador Mayoral. I am part of the RAC's Public Art team. My role is primarily managing public art projects and overseeing the Murals program. So before we meet Daren and Jaque, I just want to share just a little bit about the Here and There series came to be. Over the last 5 to 6 years, we here at the Regional Arts and Culture Council, also known as RAC, have heard directly from muralists expressing their desire to learn from each other in more intentional ways. Two things that have stood out about that desire is a wish for peer-to-peer education and also creating and building relationships with other creatives. So in an effort to address and serve those needs, we've been engaging and brainstorming with various community members, artists, and other RAC staff in the last year. I just want to give a shout out to the Murals Committee, who've been pretty central in helping arrive helping us arrive at this point with this program. One of the ideas that surfaced in just some of these brainstorming sessions was creating a space for muralists to have a dialogue about their practice, including how and why they do what they do as artists. So we thought it'd be really interesting to have the dialogue take place between a local muralist and another muralist in a different part of the country. Technology has increasingly become part of our lives as a way to connect with each other, especially in this last year and a half. And we think there's something really special about having artists connect and converse when they might not have an opportunity otherwise. Tonight's conversation is the last of the 3 conversations that have been happening between August through today. We understand knowledge sharing is important, and we hope this series will be interesting and insightful for other muralists and to the overall public that acknowledges and appreciates and engages with murals and art in their day-to-day. So with that being said, let's get into the conversation with tonight's artists, Daren and Jaque. Welcome. And before, I think as a way to get us going, can both of you give us just a quick introduction of yourselves, and then we'll jump into some questions and move into that. Whoever would like to
go
begin.
first?
I was going to say go for it.
Oh, okay. Well, hello, everyone. Good to see everybody on the screen. And my name is Jaque Fragua. I'm from Jemez Pueblo, New Mexico. And I'm streaming from, where am I? Los Cabos in Mexico. My alias is Mobile Savage, so you can find my work on the internet if you look that up. And I got that namesake just because, I move around quite a bit. It's part of the work. It's part of the industry, I suppose, to get your work out there as much as possible, especially in public art. So, I'm like this, transient human being. I've kind of, graduated from being a hobo to doing mural making and street art professionally. I come from a tiny community that's, very sedentary. A lot of our culture and our activities take place in around our, what we would call a plaza. And that's sort of the center of our universe. And that's where I keep myself grounded. And I travel quite a bit and try to express my art and my culture and share that with the rest of the world so as to bring home a sort of understanding for our people and for what happens in our tiny communities and the reservations of North America. And that's kind of a little bit of what I do in a nutshell. I've been doing this for about definitely 15 years, maybe a little bit longer than that professionally. And I've always been an artist. I feel like as a native person, art kind of comes with the culture. So you either know how to paint, dance, or sing, or all of the above. And for me, that's something that, I hold dear to my heart, and it's intrinsic within, being a human being. So that's kind of what I do in a nutshell, and that's who I am.
I'm Darren Todd. I'm an artist and musician. I'm from California, but I'm based out of Portland, Oregon. I've been here for the past 5 years or so. I do all kinds of creative work. I originally moved here to do music and was getting into the hip hop, jazz scene and culture that's up here. And then kind of switched lanes when COVID-19 hit, and I lost my day job and I decided to kind of take that leap of faith and try to do creative freelance work full time. And was fortunate enough and honestly a workaholic enough to be able to kind of make it work and pull things together. So I picked up murals uh, last year, actually, last summer. And it's been such a crazy and awesome experience just getting one mural after another, and then being able to be supported by organizations like RAC has also been super validating for me as like a newer artist. So yeah, my work is super inspired by like a lot of the art movements that have come before, and I often find myself making artwork that speaks to my community or that kind of uplifts or educates people. And then there's like another 50% of my work that's super random and just colorful movement based images. So yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell. You can follow me online under the Daily Darren or check out my work at artlargerthanme.com.
Thanks, Darren. And thanks, Jake, for getting us going. And actually, I think my first question, both of you have touched upon that, but maybe we can dig a little more, especially because I know this is centered around mural making, but I'm just curious, for both of you, like exactly why did you get into mural making? Like how did that really start? And I know, Darren, you mentioned just a little bit of it. Maybe if you want to start us off, digging just a little further into that.
Yeah, I mean, I like got obsessed with mural making back in high school. My brother and I would watch this. Uh, it was like a YouTube channel of this artist. His name was 1000. He's still creating murals, but he did a lot of like tutorials and time lapses and like this is how I created this, and we would just watch it and watch it and watch it. And at some point, I was like, I can do that, and I like want to do that. I just don't know if I'll ever find a wall, and I'm like too chicken to like do it illegally in the middle of the night. Which I have mad respect for you, but that side of the of your story. But I feel like yeah, it was always in the back of my mind, and then I just started putting it out into the universe, like in the last few years, just being like, I want to paint murals. I'm gonna paint murals. I want to paint murals, and it was like coworkers' mother's fence was like my first mural. That's that image number one. But it's basically just a fence, and I definitely didn't know what I was doing, and did my best to just try to like do a good job. And I look back and it wasn't. But yeah, I always had the idea of like wanting to make artwork that was really big and really impactful, being able to like touch that many more people and interact with communities and neighborhoods. Because once you put art up in a neighborhood, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like a piece of you stays there and people feel like, they kind of own that little piece. So it was always just a good connecting tool. And I'm just super fortunate to be able to do it.
Yeah. And for you, Jake?
Okay, so I started doing graffiti in 1999, and I was just like a snot-nosed teen, and then I went to art school, and while I was in art school, I had a project where I had to, well, I sort of volunteered myself to be a lead artist for a mural in in New Mexico, and so that kind of got me into realizing that there's like some way to connect, vandalism and like real art making. Um, and I was actually one of the lead artists, and the other lead artist was like a graffiti crewmate of mine. So we had sort of I don't know if we've uh, I don't know what the word is, but just sort of legitimized ourselves with that project, and that was in 2005, and from then I started to get more projects and started looking more into um, it started wanted to expand my horizons, and so started applying for different projects and RFPs and whatnot. And nowadays, it's more back to word of mouth.
It's interesting to hear because both Darren talking about like looking for that wall as maybe the gate, like almost the gate to entering, and then for yourself, Jake, is uh, moving from graffiti and then into something that maybe more legitimate. But I think a lot of artists, particularly, are like wondering maybe how they make that transition. Like, how do they get into this in a more consistent way, I guess? And so I'd just be curious from both of you, like, what was for maybe explaining a little more about that first official mural project. And also, it'd be interesting to hear if, like, from that, and maybe it's beyond that too, but just like, what are the things that you have learned along the way to really get you in the door, and then ultimately like has set you off both for having real consistent creative practices in mural making? Was that a lot?
No. I mean, I was just trying to like process like what was the. I feel like honestly, like the consistency in work came when I was finding myself being more consistent in creating. So like I knew I wanted to do murals, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to know how to paint on a really large scale. So I just started like buying really giant pieces of plywood and painting those in my garage, telling myself like this is practice for mural time. Like I'm gonna paint standing up and facing the wall because that's what I want to be doing. And I honestly think I kind of just like put myself on that trajectory, and I kind of tell artists that too. And I've heard that advice from like well established creatives is like whatever it is that you want to be working on, like make one yourself. Like if you want to illustrate for books, like make a little book, illustrate it yourself. Like if you want to like be a photographer that does nature photography, like be out there taking nature photographs like at all times. So like with murals, it was definitely it's a little bit harder because like yeah, it's like go out there and paint the wall is kind of like a big leap for a lot of people. But I think if you start painting large on a large scale or start doing you honestly might have to do one or two murals for free and just chalk it up to like this is the experience, this is how I get my foot in the door, like this is how I get my name on the wall. But I'd be curious to see what you think, Jake.
How to become more successful? Is that the cue? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, I would say a big part of the craft or the trade is, like Darren said, knowing how to use your tools and apply yourself. Um, there's so many muralists nowadays, and it's a big phenomenon to be out there and painting in the street. And it wasn't always like that. I would say it's definitely like, for my understanding, it's a lot easier to get yourself out there nowadays. I mean, there's so many platforms where you can start. One being social media. Obviously, a lot of people are using that route. But I do believe that you really do have to just start painting out in the open, painting walls. And like Darren said, maybe you have to do something for free here and there. But yeah, it's such an interesting trade because I call it a full contact sport. It's not really like it's like painting in the studio. It's like painting on canvas. However, there's a lot more variables involved with the process. You're dealing with the environment. You're dealing with climate. You're dealing with society or dealing with building owners. There's just so many like outliers of conditions and yeah, it's once you start experiencing that painting outside, then you kind of get this is like a make or break, I think, for a lot of people. It's like you either can handle that kind of stress or you can't. And if you can, then you know you can keep going. But I really feel like yeah, if you're outside painting, you really gotta love it. I was painting there in Portland not too long ago, and it was like 116, 118 degrees,
Oh,
and
you were here for that?
yeah, so uh, everything was closing down. I tried to go get lunch. There was no restaurants open, um, and so I ended up just going back to the wall and painting. And you know, it really is like you gotta love it, and if you don't, then probably should try something else.
I also think it helps. Like, I don't know about you, but I came from like a food service, bartending, retail background where like I've never had a job where I'm allowed to sit or even stand still. Like if you have time to lean, you have time to clean, which is a terrible capitalistic thing to say to your workers. But having been through that gauntlet for so many years, I literally, there'll be times where I'm painting and it's like, dang, I've been out here for 5 hours. And then I like look at the paint and then I look at the wall. I'm like, this is still so much better than folding napkins. Like, you end up having that stamina from being in that industry. And so this is like, oh, it's kind of equivalently hard work, but there's no boss and there's no one out here but me, and like it can be as good as I want it to be. I really just revel in the fact that there's no boss. Like if it ever becomes corporate, like I'm sure there are corporate mural painters, but if it ever is like, oh, we're gonna get you a project manager, like I I'll quit
um,
that.
I mean, yeah, that's a whole other subject. Maybe we can get into it later because I do work with a lot of project managers. I do work with interior designers. I work with, I would say, like middle people,
Mm.
and you as a entrepreneur, you kind of have to be flexible, right?
Yeah.
And there's things you can say no to, and there's things you can say, yes to, and um, maybe we'll get into that later. But um, I'm not trying to discourage anybody from becoming a muralist either. I think it's one of the best experiences and careers one can have here in on Earth. However, it's definitely not an easy path, and it's like there's a huge learning curve to it. And for the industry that I'm in, it's kind of like we're writing the rules as we go because there's no rule book there to reference or um, I know just like recently there are institutions starting to provide public art mural courses, but that's just in recent times. So um, yeah, there's a whole wealth of knowledge, and I feel like if you are going to go down the path of becoming a successful muralist, you your best bet is working alongside another muralist who's been doing it for a long time or who is successful and learning from them. So I would say part of it is finding people who have the same passion as you and spending time with them.
I appreciate that, Jake. Actually, it's one of the things that our murals program is thinking about doing is getting into something that's a little more consistent and structured with like murals kind of training. And it's something that I'm also realizing is there's very few programs out there, but starting to see them pop up a little more each year. So I appreciate what you were mentioning around that. I think then this is part of the value then of these conversations, right? Because there isn't a guidebook. So a lot of people who are interested just are like curious. There's a lot of curiosity and trying to find like who can help guide me. I'm curious for both of you, like maybe as a way to also like break down or peek behind the curtain, like what can you both take us through what is sort of like what's the process for you, like when you're starting a mural, maybe from start to finish, like how do you approach a project? What are the things that you start first? Yeah, what are the things that you're keeping in mind? Like I'd be curious what that looks like, and it can be anywhere. I mean, this is really open, but anywhere from like maybe budget, because that's another thing that comes up often. Artists are constantly wondering, like, how do I pay myself? Like, what's an appropriate price? um, what is like reasonable timelines? Like, yeah, just what would you feel is, or I guess guide us through that. What does that mural creation process look like when you start a project?
I'll go ahead. So nowadays, usually how everything is initiated is through email or some type of communication. Somebody wants to hire me for a project. Um, so then we'll go back and forth about the details of the project itself, and um, then we'll determine the budget. And the budget usually is determined by, for me, I go by square footage. So I charge a certain amount, a certain rate per square foot. A lot of other artists do it differently. I just feel like for me, it's good to, it helps me like round out things easily and, stay consistent. Um, and as like I get further along in my career, I up the price of the square foot, here and there. Um, and then from there, decide like, yeah, is the design or the artwork, um, is it demanding? Is it going to be detailed? Is it going to be comprehensive? Or is it something super simple that I don't have to waste a lot of my resources on? And I could like still provide some type of artwork for the project. And so some projects require a little bit more time and money and resources, and some projects, could just be a simple graphic, easy 1-2 color type thing. Um, and depending on like what type of artwork you do, my style is very um, illustrative, I would say, and a lot of it can be abstract. So I kind of jump around in terms of designs and stylistic choices, and then from there, you have to schedule everything. Make sure that your projects aren't overlapping. Make sure that you have enough time to recover, which is like a huge, you know, part of the process that I feel like most people don't ever express, because recovery is such a huge part of the my process. I don't know for other artists. Like I need time off to be able to recharge from using my mind, my body, and my spirit for hours at a time, for weeks at a time. And so, that's another part I would encourage, is the recovery of your physical self, because these projects are not. I do some large scale stuff, as you guys know, and being on a lift for several days and weeks is not easy on the body. So um, as I get older, that I realize, okay, if I want to keep my longevity, I have to be sure to take breaks and not burn out. So I have to schedule in that time for myself. And after scheduling everything, then it's making sure you're in communication with your project managers and people who are hiring you and staying on top of that. All of this could probably be easily like done if you had a assistant or your own manager whenever you might need that. But I still do everything myself. I'm just kind of a control freak, so I like to know everything about what I'm doing. And so after that, it's like, yeah, getting the materials, the resources you need to make the project happen, making sure that you order things ahead of time so everything gets there to the project site on time, making sure all your tools are taken care of and you have your ladders, your paint and your brushes and everything that you need to be able to execute. So when it comes time to execute, all you do is just show up and you have your designs, you have your projectors, you have your chalk line, whatever it is, so you can hit the ground running and get things done. Um, I don't really mess around when I show up on a project. I'm there to work. I'll work 12, 15-hour days, sleep a little bit, go back, and then keep hitting the wall until it's done. And for me, most projects take me 4 to 12 days, something like that. And if I want to get it done faster, I'll hire an assistant, usually somebody who's trying to learn and be a part of the process and figure things out along the way. And then, yeah, finish the project and go on to the next.
Yeah, I appreciate you also just saying that mentorship that you had mentioned earlier, of like, for artists who are interested, pair up with someone who knows what to do, and the fact that you offer that in your own like practice, hearing that's something that's part of your value system. That, yeah, I appreciate that.
It's
Darren.
super. I just want
Mhm.
to say, like, it's super important to me because I feel like that's what got me started. Like I said, I started a project as a lead artist, and I was teaching a lot of youth how to paint a mural. And I myself, this is my first mural. I didn't really have that experience, but I knew how to paint walls. I knew like the technical things of using paint and materials, but the I guess like the conceptual or like the artistry behind it, I didn't quite have that grasp yet. And it's important for me to share that knowledge and that kind of approach with people who are trying to get into the space of painting murals, because honestly, like, I don't want shitty murals in my city or my space. I'd love for like great artwork to be out in the world, and if I can like help, with my knowledge and the things that I know, I'd love to contribute that way.
Yes, yes. I could see Darren at different points as Jake was talking, you smiling, laughing a little. I'd love to hear from you just some of this for your own self and what's resonating.
I mean, Jake, you pretty much hit the method for sure. I pretty much follow that same process from start to finish, and then sometimes there's a lot of back and forth with art directors or commission parties where you're doing a lot of revisions. And then that first day when you get to the wall, you're just like so stoked, and then you're like, "Dang, I forgot my ladder," or like, "Dang, I don't have any rollers," or like so many times. So I've started to just like keep a checklist and, like you say, like make sure I have all the equipment I need before I roll over there and end up like trying to finger paint. I had put square footage was really helpful and like kind of mind opening thing where I don't actually know what I was basing my prices on in the beginning. I think just like, oh, I don't know, $500 sounds like a lot. And then finding myself working for like 4 days for $500, which is like, oh, I'm never going to be able to survive on this. I need to charge more money. Like, I just sold my work for less than minimum wage. And someone was like, why don't you like make a formula that way, like as the murals get bigger, you're consistently charging the same amount. And once I figured that out, I was like, oh, okay, definitely doing it that way. I do my paintings that way too. That way there's never any imposter syndrome kind of creeping in and being like, this isn't that good, you should charge less. It's like, if someone wants to buy it, this is the price, this is the price I consistently charge, this is what it's worth. And it really helps like value the work. Now, I also was nodding at recovery. That's kind of my struggle lesson for this year is like, I've planned so many projects, especially like these next 2 months, and I'm realizing everything is back to back. And at some point, I'm just going to like totally burn out. And we had talked about this before in our little pre-meeting, but like it's difficult as a creative person to like give yourself downtime, because then when you get to the downtime, you're looking around and you're like, what if no other projects come? Like, what if this little bit of money that I made from the last project isn't enough for the next month? And I'm constantly just honestly like stressing. And I think that's part of like the struggle of freelance. But I still think like I do so much better work when I give myself a chance to reset, to like clean my kitchen that I've been ignoring on those 15-hour work days, and to like, reconnect with my community. Because I feel like when I paint murals, I'm very much like, it's like you said, like it's up at like 6, you're by the wall by 7, you're there till sundown, you just like scarf some food and pass out. Like I don't see anyone, I don't really talk to anyone. I listen to so many podcasts and I love that, but it's also like, ooh, I gotta like be a person again for a couple days before I go back to that like monk mode. So yeah, that's dope to hear your process and to be like, okay, I do all those things. I'm not too far behind.
Yeah, it's great to have friends, who can drop by and hand you a coffee or bring you a sandwich or something like that. And for me, like traveling the world and painting, it's such a great way to connect with just people who are local, people who are part of the community, and this is like something you're giving them as like an artist, as like a visiting uh,
Mm-hmm.
creative, and usually that most people are great, show some gratitude for that, and they want to help you as much as possible. But yeah, it's great to make friends. And well, I was going to mention, something that I feel like really helped me a lot in the process of becoming more successful, quote unquote, um, is I run my my career as a business. I have an LLC, um, and when I'm pricing things and when I'm charging for things, I write everything off that is part of my expense. So, you know, all the money, because usually a lot of the projects I'm doing are it's all inclusive. So I charge a high price, and then I take out money for the expenses that I need to make the project happen. So I'll put money aside for supplies, for hotels, for those kinds of things, rental cars, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of the fiscal year, I can tally everything up and make sure that my the prices that I'm charging are reflective of inflation. They're reflective of what tax I'm supposed to be paying, all those kinds of things. Because I don't ever want to be on the other side of being like not paying myself enough. I
Mm-hmm.
I know what my value is as an artist, and what I do is um, I want to be able to like pay myself a good rate.
Yeah.
I have a family of my own, so I'm paying for a couple of different people, and like I take that in account. I take that in account of my own salary and what I pay myself, so that I'm able to support several people with what I do. And something that I'd like to, encourage too is raise your price. that's that's for me, coming from a space where money is sort of like this. I didn't have any financial literacy growing up. I come from a reservation, so we don't really have that kind of understanding as a lot of other people do. But I always saw people, especially artists from the communities, selling their work for very, very cheap. And people would sell their goods, pottery, jewelry, different things for pennies on the dollar, just because of the scarcity mentality. And for me, like, if I'm not getting my rate in, let's say, Portland, then I'll go to Italy, where they're going to pay me handsomely for the things that I do because they value what I do. Or go to another market, wherever I can get the best rates for my work. I feel like certain communities do value artists in that kind of way, and some communities know how to exploit them very well because they do it all the time. So in the idea of initiating a project or starting another mural or doing work, I always have the result in my mind at the same time that I'm planning. So is this, for me, is it going to burn me out? Is this enough time? Is this like, going to pay me enough? And if it's not, any of those things don't meet, then I'll scratch it and go on to the next thing. So
I appreciate that. One of the things. Oh, go ahead, Jake. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, luckily for me, I have to turn down work nowadays. So I feel like, if you keep doing it, you're just consistent. You're doing great work, and you're putting yourself out there, and you're exposed as a creative. Then you'll get the work. I don't even have an Instagram, so I mean I do, but it's like I don't. It's not like I don't use social media. I don't use those kinds of platforms to get my work out there. My work essentially is word of mouth, and it speaks for itself, and it's out there in the world. So that's my calling card, and I've been doing it for a long time. So
yeah, I think that dovetails nicely into one of the things I was wondering also was, and you said it before, both of you have, around burnout, like avoiding burnout, right? And like, how do you stay consistent? And so hearing not only like, it sounds like making sure that there's recovery time, but also putting that as part of your criteria before you accept a job or not. That's also, I just think, really important to hear. Darren, you have, I'm just curious if you have other thoughts around what Jake is saying in those regards. Like,
I mean, it's difficult. I feel like every so often I'm like calling my parents being like, I took a job that I shouldn't have said yes to. And, at one time my dad sent me this little like flow chart basically of like, you get a job, you write down like what it's going to take in like hours and like design time and like how much downtime and like how much prep time, and write all these things down. And then it's like a chart that like measures and a number. And if it's like, if this project isn't like over a 6, don't do it. You know what I mean? Or if it's like, a 2 in return, for what you're going to put in versus what you get out, like don't sign up for it. And I'm still learning how to use that chart because, we're like conditioned to say like, what's the job? Yes, I'll do it. But I feel like you miss so many good opportunities when you're really focused on taking every opportunity, because every opportunity isn't necessarily like a good fit. And it hasn't been until the last maybe like last 6 months that I've been like, somebody will come to me with a project and it's something that I like just don't do. Like someone's like, can you, do this really hyper realistic portrait of my grandfather, and I now can be like, no, like that's not what I do. That's not the kind of art that I make. And I feel like you could find someone else to do this project, and like you would be happy. I wouldn't feel stressed. Like it's just not in. It's not in the cards. And I feel like people respect that like infinitely more than they do if you just try to take it on and struggle with it and end up procrastinating and or not finishing, or there's a breakdown in communication. I feel like a lot of the beginning stages of creative work is just trying to figure out how to communicate with clients and with people. People have an idea in their head, and then you have to pull it out of their head and turn it into something tangible, and that can be super intimidating. So it's super helpful when you can say like, no, that's not like that's never going to come out of my head. Let me not even walk down that path. It's hard though. It's a balance. I feel like maybe that comes with longevity.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of artists, especially as they're getting going, just trying to fit, I think, potentially all the different clients' needs. And so as a result, right, like stylistically, just going in all sorts of directions, and maybe it's harder then to sort of own your own style or what you do, and then as a result, right, like say, nope, that's not me, I can't do that. Yeah, and I think I've heard a lot of artists talk about that over the years. One of the things like thinking about, and I feel like Jake sort of is moving us in this direction. But we all had a pre-conversation before this where actually Jake and Darren got to meet each other. And one of the things I thought was really fascinating that came out of that conversation was the discussion of NFTs. And I say this too because it's something that I've been hearing more recently, this year particularly. And so I'm just curious, and I know we've got like we got like 11 minutes, and I might be taking us down a down a long road, but I'm just wondering, at least to get the conversation going, for both of you, like, can you share more about, first of all, I don't think a lot of people still understand what an NFT is, and what does that mean for you in your own work, or how is that intersecting with your work? Yeah.
Do you have anything to say first, Darren?
I mean, I was gonna let you take it because to be straight up and honest, that conversation that we had planted this insane seed in my head. Now I'm obsessed, but I feel like the OG of NFTs for me is you. So I'm like,
Oh
preach.
yeah, no, no, I'm fairly new to it myself. Well, I've been experimenting with the crypto space for maybe like 5 years or so. And investing my own my own time and my energy and my money into it. And just learning, trying to embrace this whole new like technology and way of communication, way of understanding value. And I think, as artists, like that's a big part of our stick is like trying to get everyone to understand the value of what we do. And it's always a very difficult thing when you can't, explain it in words. And I feel like with NFTs, it's very explainable in data, and it's explainable in numbers. So it's very very empirical, versus like this like abstract or random way of like experiencing what value is in art. And I think the thing that got most people interested in the idea is just seeing these NFTs, which are non-fungible tokens. They're basically essentially like I guess you could say like a birth certificate, would be in the real world. You can't like fake it. You can't like change it. It is what it is. And some of these things are JPEGs. Some of these things are their deeds to property. Some of these things NFTs are for sale as web addresses. You know, there's a lot of things that you can mint, as they say, on the blockchain. One of them happens to be, you know, artwork, and it can come in the form of, like I said, a JPEG or a video, animation, a GIF, these types of things. So, yeah, when you see something going for like, you know, millions of dollars, a JPEG going for millions of dollars, I think it perks up anybody's like, you know, interest. And then you start to see like how it happens and how this stuff works. And for me, it got me interested, or I was intrigued because of the idea of increasing the value of your work, or not necessarily increasing, but just establishing the value of your work and doing it in a way that's very egalitarian, I suppose. And so, you know, I started minting my own NFTs. I I don't know if I'm the first Native American artist to mint an NFT, but I wanted to be the first. So I learned about it as much as I could, and I minted my first NFT, and I did it through this platform called Rarible. Right now, I use OpenSea as a platform to mint my NFTs now, and so most of the NFTs that I have are minted on the blockchain of Ethereum. And so I don't know if that's like a good answer, but I mean, that's what I have to say about that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Darren.
I mean, I took your kind of steps and duplicated that and just hopped onto OpenSea and was putting things out the last like I think it's been a week and a half or maybe 2 weeks since we talked, and I've just been putting up one digital piece every day. I like have always kind of played around with digital art and like taught myself Photoshop and Illustrator, but never took the time to like really develop a personal style. So I thought like putting out a daily project is like one of the best ways to like find a voice within a certain genre of art. So I'm going to do it in digital art, and I'm just going to put it on the blockchain and see what happens. And honestly, I like put one up one night at like 11 and put one up at like 3 a.m. that same night. And then when I woke up the next day, they both had sold. And I was just like, what? Is that my mom? Did my mom get some like ETH and try to buy it? And then I like went on for a week, and then that same person bought another one. So I'm like, oh, that's weird. I have a collector. My partner's like, that's creepy. Like, you don't know who it is. I'm like, yeah, but I think about how many paintings that I have that are just out in the world, or like, I had a guy call me and be like, I want to video you, and I saw your art, and I'm like, cool, where are you from? He's like, North Carolina. I'm like, how did my art get to North Carolina? And that's amazing. And then to think of the implications of that when you're putting things onto this virtual like universe that we're creating. Like there's so many people that I've talked to just in the last 2 weeks from all around the world with projects like from small personal projects to like change the world level type ideas to where I'm like, dang, I don't even dream big enough. Like I thought I was a dreamer. I'm like not even a dreamer compared to some of these people on here who are like creating social tokens that are gonna like solve, you know, like where when people buy it and resell it, pennies go back to like running a soup kitchen in their hometown, and like people are like, oh, if you buy this art, it like provides like free tampons to like another woman every time that one's sold, or just like all kinds of big brain stuff where I'm like, dang, this is some crazy positive energy, and I feel myself like spiraling the drain of like, oh no, I'm gonna be just stuck in there, you're never gonna find me, I'm never gonna come out. But I get attracted to stuff like that where it's like if I feel that energy, I just have to go towards it. So I feel like for any creatives that are out there that are wondering if they should like look into it, you probably should just look into it. It's so new and it's so early that like it's rare that you get to like jump onto something in a first wave, and this is definitely like
Mm.
first wave time where it's not even really caught on to like mainstream at all. So I don't know. Thank you for like giving me that final push and being like, check it out, see what's out there.
Yeah, I think it's obviously like it's revolutionary technology, and it's interesting because of the idea of being decentralized, um, or that's I feel like that's at the core of cryptocurrency in general. So I feel like as an artist, I've always been trying to decentralize my art, and that's where like the graffiti and the street art and all that comes in because there's no approval, there's no negotiating, there's no you know it's just boom, it's there, and like that's it, and like you take it or leave it. You create the value you want for it, or you trash it. Like I don't care. I made it and it's there. That's why I love graffiti. But for me, like this is like the graffiti of the virtual space.
Yeah, definitely.
And people will pay people pay a lot of money for those type of things, and I feel like more so than they would if they walked into a gallery. And
Mm.
with cryptocurrency, it's people get it either by trading or by investing their own fiat or capital into it, but somehow they have it and they're willing to spend it more so than they would, something like write a check for a painting. And yeah, it's interesting. It's very compelling, and I think it's going to change the art world forever.
I agree. I agree. I'll be curious to look back at this conversation in like a year or even like 5 years and be like, dang, remember when we talked about this? And just to see like where everything is.
Yeah, I got a buddy who gets paid in ETH for murals. So
Wow.
that's how he does his thing. He just wants people to send him the ETH, and then he moves on to the next project.
That's
Wow.
so dope. That's sick.
um, Thank you both. I know there's so much that we could go into. I just think it's really, I mean, I think there's a number of levels where I find it interesting. Obviously, right? Like as a creative space, what does that mean? But also sort of like the larger implications, especially Jake, as you were saying, sort of the egalitarian aspects of this. Like I just think there's a lot there. And I didn't even think about sort of that connection between graffiti and sort of other ways in which like folks have tried to decentralize their art or kind of decentralize art practices and sort of the connection to this. So I really appreciate that. Thank you both. And I know it's coming up more. In fact, I just saw a Times article recently around particularly art and NFTs, and so like the conversations are bubbling for sure. Um, I think we're at 7:01, and I don't think there's any questions that we have. Is that
Well,
right, Anna?
I have a
Or
question. I
okay.
just want to thank you both so much. I'm learning so much as an artist myself, and it's just really inspiring to hear you bounce off of each other too. I'm wondering if you don't mind to wrap up. Can you just tell us what's on the horizon for you, Darren? I know you said you have a busy couple of months coming up. Um, Jake, I'm curious what you're up to, if you don't mind, because I want to make sure I send out links to folks so they can follow along with your work and keep up with you. And if you don't mind just telling us a little bit, that would be great.
Sure. Right now, I'm just doing a lot of private projects. Also, I'm doing some work in Palo Alto and Silicon Valley area for some big tech companies that you might have heard of. And so that's kind of what's coming up. And I'm doing a project for a hotel in Joshua Tree, like in a week or so. And it's called Auto Camp. So if you're in the Joshua Tree area and you want to go camping, there's a cool hotel out there that'll have my artwork. Then I'll be hopefully doing a project in Miami for Basel, and it'll be an NFT show similar to the one that me and my buddies organized in Medellin, Colombia. And so yeah, they're doing an NFT show in December, and the next year, who knows what's on the horizon. I actually make music as well, so I'm recording some music right now here in Mexico, and I'll be releasing some music out pretty soon.
Cool.
And Jake, can they find this on your website?
Yeah.
As
So
well?
my website is mobilesavage.com, MOBIL, like the gas station, and savage, like a, crazy person.
I linked it. Thanks, Jake, and thanks for letting us be a stop on your journey right now too.
Oh yeah, no doubt, you guys. It's inspiring to have these conversations, and it always helps. I don't think I think it's an equal exchange. It helps me to reflect on and see things in a retrospective way, and kind of plan things further ahead. So it's a really good like placeholder to have these kind of conversations. So thank you guys for hosting it and having us.
Of course. Thanks.
Yeah.
Darren, what you got? What's going on?
So I'm working on curating for Mr. Daryl Grant. He's an educator out of PSU that does jazz and amazing roles. He's got a soul restoration project that's taking place at the Albina Arts Center. It's on I think Williams and Killingsworth. Like it's at 14 Northeast Killingsworth. But basically, we're putting some art in there, inviting people to come by and experience the space, just kind of reactivating that space as a point of like a gathering point for the Black community, and just really honoring the legacy of what's happened in that building over the decades here in Portland. So that takes place November 4th. And you can catch up with that on Daryl's Instagram or on mine. I'll probably be shouting out about it. And then I'm also kind of at the same time preparing to open up a pop-up shop for my practice, which is just called Art Larger Than Me Shop. It's just going to be like merch, t-shirts, prints, and then a bunch of art. And I'll be actually like working in there, painting things, and then putting them up for sale right away. Inviting a few artists that inspire me to like put some works in there. Maybe doing like a drink and draw or like a beat night where you can come and chill. But in any case, it's been kind of like a lifelong dream to have a little store. And so I'm taking it on a little test run for the next few months. And that's going to be on Fremont and Williams, right across from the New Seasons. So again, follow me on Instagram or check out my website, artlargerthanme.com, to kind of stay up on when that happens. But I think opening day is that same weekend, like November 4th, 5th.
Wow, you're gonna be busy too.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so busy.
Yeah.
That is soon.
Yeah, it's like next week.
No, that's so great though. Yeah, good for you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I think that's all I have. Thank you both so much. And Salvador, thank you for moderating, facilitating, whatever, joining. I mean, you added to this conversation as well. Thank you to our interpreters and our live captioning contractor here. And thank you to Chris at Open Signal and everyone at Open Signal who helped us produce this in a beautifully done way. Yeah, I think that's it. Sal, do you have anything else? thanks to everyone who joined is
Just
the other thing I would say.
yeah, deep gratitude to both you, Jaque and Daren. Like, thank you so much. I'm so thrilled that we were able to end this series with both of your voices. And I really feel like there were a lot of places we went that we haven't gone in other past conversations. And so it's just adding to that beautiful plethora of like knowledge out there. So thank you. And yeah, everything Anna had said, open signal, the interpreters. Anna has been amazing helping me co-organize this. So there's a lot of love between that I'm feeling for everything. So yeah, deep gratitude.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a good Thursday evening.
Yeah.